this gospel should be of special interest to us. Here we have the account in the Gospel of Mark of Jesus calling the 12, and he calls them by name. He chooses each one in a very personal way. And as they are remembered here in the Gospel of Mark, if you read the names of the 12 in Matthew and in Luke, you'll find that the first 4 or 5 are consistent. They're Peter, Andrew, James, John, and so forth. You'll find that. But when you get down to the last 3 or 4, they vary. Because when they were shaping these Gospels, like 30, 40 years after Christ, they didn't quite remember precisely who the last few were, except Judas Iscariot. They would always remember Judas Iscariot. He's always the last who is named. Now, the Gospels are very strong on the notion of the 12. This is the new Israel. The 12 are the 12 tribes of Israel. Except in John's Gospel, John doesn't give much attention to the 12, the notion of the 12. What does this mean to us? Keep in mind that after Jesus dies, in due time, these 12 are scattered. We have no idea what happened to most of them. We know about Peter. We don't know about John. There's a tradition John went to Ephesus. That's a tradition. And if you go to Ephesus today, they'll show you the house of John, where Mary, the mother of Jesus, went and stayed there with John. But that's a tradition. We don't know what happened to these. They were chosen to bring Christ to the world, not so that they themselves would be prominent. They become much less important after they have proclaimed Jesus Christ to the world. That's their mission. After that, their mission is over, and remembering them is not so important. Keep that in mind. We are sent to proclaim Jesus Christ to the world, not to promote ourselves. And therefore, in due time, they will all be forgotten, and Jesus Christ will live on. That's the whole meaning of this. It affects every one of us in some ways. You know, there's a certain divine providence about our lives. On this day, 50 years ago, my life changed radically. In 1968, I was 28 years old, working in a parish, and I was just 4 years ordained. And I was assigned, much against my preference, I might say, to be secretary to Cardinal MacIntyre, who was an elderly cardinal, had done a lot of good, and his life at this time was very complicated. However, I was promised that after I finished working with Cardinal MacIntyre for a few years, they would release me to go in the armed forces, for which I had volunteered. They were looking for young priests to go to Vietnam. And I had this dream kind of thing about being a chaplain in the armed forces, out in the war zone, and all these idealistic things that young people dream about. And they said, no, we're going to assign you to work with Cardinal MacIntyre, but if you work with him for a few years, then we'll let you go. So I said, okay. And so I went to work with Cardinal MacIntyre, which was a testing assignment in its own way. But on January 21st, 1970, 50 years ago, Cardinal MacIntyre retired and Archbishop Manning took over. And they had a press conference in the morning with the Cardinal and the Archbishop to announce the new successor to Los Angeles. And that afternoon, not the next day, that very day, now I knew Archbishop Manning quite well by that time. I went to his office and I said, now, Archbishop, I was promised to be released to go in the armed forces. He said, I know. and I will honor the promise. But I would appreciate it if you would not go, if you'd work with me. Well, what could I say? I said, okay. He died 19 years later, and I was still with him for 19 years. That reshaped my whole life, my whole spiritual life, the whole journey of life. And you will find, if you look at your life, you'll find these liminal moments, these decisive moments in your life. Maybe you got married, you got divorced, some radical thing happened in your life, and you'll find that weave this into the story of your life, and you will find God's presence. Strangely enough, sometimes it's almost paradox. You think a total failure, and in fact, it's an invitation to a new understanding of yourself and of God's providence in your life. That's the teaching here. These apostles are called. They didn't expect this. It was something beyond their dreams. They were called to sacrifice. They were called to put Christ first in their lives, not their own ambitions. And strangely enough, these are liminal times. The threshold, you stand on a threshold in your life. Whatever happened to you, it could be some radical failure or some diversion in your life. And I want you to weave that into the gospel of your life. Some moment that you look back and you say, wow, I thought this was the greatest calamity in my life. And somehow, in the power of Jesus Christ, it was the Lord that led you through it. Now, the Lord didn't bring the calamity upon you, but allowed you to understand it in a new way, or bring the gift of the moment upon you. It somehow was a weaving into your life. And I absolutely believe that wherever I am right now, this is where God meant me to be, because the weaving of God in my life, a mysterious type of thing, where I've gone through light and darkness, success and failure, and somehow the Lord brought me to this day. And that's important for us to keep in mind. You get this sense that God is in your life, that the security of your life is in the power of Jesus Christ. Don't rely on money, success, fame, fortune, all that stuff. That all passes. The only enduring reality to sustain us in life is the faith we have in Jesus Christ. Now that's the teaching of this gospel here today. It's very real to me in my life. Even when I come to Holy Family, I didn't want to come to Holy Family. I definitely did not want to come to Holy Family. But Cardinal Manning wanted to come here to retire. So I came to Holy Family. Probably the greatest gift I ever got in the last 50 years of my life. So somehow, it's the weaving of God in your life. And I absolutely see the weaving of God in my life. And wherever the Lord takes me, I'm going to rely absolutely on the power of Jesus Christ in my life. Therefore, I have no fear. If I have to die tomorrow or next year, it's okay. It's the Lord that leads me. Now keep that in mind. That's all you need to hear about this gospel. But it's a very powerful teaching about the journey of life for each and every one of us. Now, respect life is a sacred call in discipleship. So keep in mind the mandate we have in the power of the Holy Spirit to respect all life. In a special way, we think today of the unborn life. But all life needs our attention, our care, our respect, and our prayer.